That's not good. So what you just saw is obviously not normal. And here's another symptom we had was excessive vibration. This was mostly happening at idle at like a red light and at slow speeds, especially in reverse. And this picture does not do it justice. You can see the water vibrating here, but the whole car was just shaking at low RPMs. So these are both symptoms of failing engine mounts. Now, it was a big job, but here is the before and after differences in the vibration. It's night and day. So let's get started. What we have here is a second generation Cadillac CTS. This is the 2008 year model. This is the same car that we did the micro switch replacement on a few years ago. I'll put a link here in the video. And this is the 3.6 DI all-wheel drive model. The process, from what I understand, should be pretty similar through all of the second generation, which I believe is 2008 through 2014. However, I would imagine that this being an all-wheel drive model, things might look a little different than with the standard two-wheel drive vehicles. And so we're going to take you through the process of what we found. There was very little information and very vague information on how to do the motor mount replacements on this vehicle online. A lot of stuff for the first generation, but not a whole lot for the second generation. So here's a quick unboxing, if you will, and look at the brand new motor mounts. I will put part numbers in the description below, but keep in mind that there are different part numbers for the all-wheel drive vehicles, so your part numbers will probably be different. There's also different part numbers for the right and the left engine mounts. So I think the engine mounts are actually the same, except for the little metal shield that you'll see here for the driver's side. I opted for brand new AC Delco parts. These were purchased at a fraction of what the dealership wanted on eBay. I will link to the seller in the description below. He got them here quick and at a very reasonable price. Now, to pull this lower engine cover off, you have four 10mm bolts. One here, and two up front. Now, yours won't look like this with these metal brackets. These we made a couple of years ago because the whole bottom end of the cover here was sagging, and it had gotten so bad that it was dragging on the ground. I suspect that the people at the quick oil change places, instead of actually removing this like they should, will pull this down to drain the oil, and you know, just being lazy and being cheap and quick. But those are what those are there for, and they're just little pieces of aluminum. So this video is not going to be as much of a step-by-step and detailed as some of my other DIY videos. This is going to be more of just the process as we learned it and as we went along. But it should help you figure out the process and how to get these boogers out of here. So here, tucked up in this cavity, is the driver's side engine mount, and there's not much room to work, and even less room to pull it out. And here up on the front of the engine is the passenger side mount. This one is a breeze compared to the driver's side. So we started off by removing the nuts from the bottom of both the driver's and passenger side engine mounts. This will allow the engine room to move when we jack it up. And next, we carefully positioned a small jack under the engine and slowly and carefully jacked the engine up. to allow room to get the mounts out. Coffee. Okay, so last night was supposed to be a set up the cameras, pull the engine cover off, find what tools we needed, and go to bed. But in typical David and Danny fashion, it became just it became 2 hours of just one more thing. So here's where we're at. Engine cover obviously is off. That's 4 10mm bolts. Next step was to pull the nuts off the bottom of each engine mount. So this little hole here is the driver's side. That's a 21mm nut, and this hole back here is the passenger side. Same thing, 21mm. Now, in most cases, just the driver's side mount is the one that's broken. We're gonna go ahead and replace both. Even if you were only replacing the driver's side, you'd wanna loosen up the bottom bolt over here so that the engine has room to move around. So, we could access two of there's a bracket on top of the engine mount, and we could access 2 of those bolts from right here through this hole. And then there's 2 on the other side that we could not. So off came the wheel and the wheel liner, and that has given us better access over here to remove the other 2. And so the current status is the engine mount and the bracket are loose in this cavity, but there's not room to slide it out. And we actually did separate the 2. We removed the top 21mm nut off the top of the engine mount too. So the bracket, which hopefully we'll pull out here and look at in a minute, and the engine mount, which really hopefully we'll pull out and look at in a minute, will be out and we can look at them further. So that gets us caught up, and so the issue now is the engine mount is loose. There it is, and if you look closely you can see the engine mount bracket. I don't think it's going to focus on it, but it's laying loose back there too. So the problem is this will not fit through this opening, and it sure won't fit through this opening, and there's no way to get it out the top. So options we're considering besides brute force at this point are removal of the catalytic converter, which this side would be easy, but the top side wouldn't be so fun, or possibly the wheel axle. So we've decided to go the route of removing the catalytic converter. The heads of the bolts are up top, so we removed, what was that, a sway bar, I guess? Anyway, and about 3 10mm bolts to pull the heat shield off, which gains us access to the top of where the catalytic converter meets up to get to these bolts, we hope. All right, we've finally been successful. This is the old driver's side engine mount. And so the key was removing the catalytic converter. That's what let us finally pull it out. And I'll show more of that in a minute. So first off, just to give you an idea of how this is mounted in here, this is the top. The shield is usually like this, and the bottom. That is what went through the frame. This bracket goes on top like this, and 4 bolts into the side of the engine. So these two over here, what I was talking about earlier, these two on the rear of the engine or towards the back of the car, we could get to without removing anything but the bottom engine cover. These two over here, we had to get to through the wheel well. Although in hindsight, these two would have been much easier had we taken the wheel well off to begin with. So that's how that fits on there. Now I suspect that we're just going to put the new mount and this in there loose and then tighten everything up as we get it in, because I don't think this whole piece will fit in there all as one shot. So as a comparison, here is the old engine mount compared to the new one. And this one right here, you can push all you want, nothing moves. It's just, I mean, I'm not very strong, but, but nothing moves any which way. This one, the one we just pulled out, has definitely failed, and that's why I have this heat shield pulled up. So you can see how that's just, I mean, I bet if we pull on this enough, it would probably just come up. I mean, you shouldn't be able to do this. I don't think that's by design. And from what I understand, these are fluid filled, and so once that breaks and deteriorates, it leaks out everywhere, which we had been noticing some extra fluid, which I'm suspecting is where this came from. And this might be something that's interesting later to pull apart. I could almost pull it apart by hand. But yeah, that's definitely a bad engine mount. And when you look at it from underneath, it doesn't really look all that bad. But up top, it definitely is. And this shield here just protects the rubber against heat from the engine. That appears to me to be the only difference. The driver and the passenger side have 2 different part numbers, but I can't swear to it, but I would suspect these are the same exact part, and one has a shield and one doesn't. And one just costs a few dollars more. So, okay, and to catch you up underneath here, of course, we went through the top to get the 2 bolts off the top of the catalytic converter. This was tough to break loose down here, but a little tip, you do want to break loose both sides. That will allow this to move around enough to get it free. Now we just went ahead and left, for now, the O2 sensor plugged in and just pushed this up out of the way, and that gave us enough room through here for it to come right out. You know, the factory shop manual instructions have you pulling all kinds of other things. So I'm not sure what that's all about, but this appears to be the easiest way that we've found to do it. Now that we've done it and we know what we're doing, I would say, let's see, we worked on it for 2 hours last night. So we've worked on it probably an hour and a half this morning. So 3.5 hours to get to this point. But now that we know what we're doing, if we had just started and not played around with other things, if we had pulled the wheel and the wheel well off first and then pulled the catalytic converter off and not even messed with the engine mount or the bolts or anything and just got all that out of the way, I bet we would already have the other one in. So hopefully this video will keep you from spending as much time as we've spent on it, but it really hadn't been too bad yet. Keep in mind there's all kinds of wiring harnesses and whatnot up here that look like they go to, I don't know. So just be careful when you're pulling stuff around not to catch anything. So far my advice would be pull the wheel liner, pull the catalytic converter before you even mess around with the mount or the bracket. All right, we just decided to go ahead and we disconnected the wiring harness to the O2 sensor on the catalytic converter so we could just pull it out. And now we have just all kinds
of room to work. So there you can see on the side of the engine, hopefully, the 4 bolt holes. So that's where we got to go. And we tried a minute ago to just slide them up with the mount and the bracket attached together, but it wouldn't work. So we'll just put them up there one at a time and then hand tighten them. And then tighten everything up. And then do the other side.
Now guys, even with the added room, this is still a 2-person job in my opinion. It's just so helpful when you've got an extra set of hands and eyes. And you know, this job can obviously be done on jack stands, but it was way easier with the lift. So if you have access to one, take advantage of it. Now what you're seeing here is how we loosened the bolt on the top of the passenger side engine mount. There's a lot of room to work in the front of the engine once you get all the plastic covers off. However, there's a hard metal pipe above this bolt that prevents you from being able to fit an actual socket on it. But this wrench worked well, and it was slow going, but it was way easier than the driver's side. Alright, the passenger side is pretty much a breeze. Before we had already loosened the bottom bolt in the frame, and we were able to just remove the engine covers here, the plastic ones. I used a 13/16 closed wrench, and the top of the bracket is right here underneath this hard metal hose. If that hard metal pipe had not been there, this would have been way easier. Sprayed a little WD-40 on it, let it sit, and then loosen the bolt up. And with the engine propped up, we were able to just wiggle the engine mount out without having to actually remove the bracket like the other side. So that saved a ton of time. We actually repositioned the jack over on this side of the bottom of the engine to push up this side higher, which let it slide right out. And here's the old mount. It doesn't look nearly as bad as the driver's side, and I'm not really sure if it's totally failed, but it does appear to be coming apart if you look real close here on the edges, so might as well replace it. There is some doubt about whether we really needed to replace the passenger side, but if there's any doubt, that's gone now. I just looked over here where we had set the passenger side one, and it is leaking oil all over this nice table here. So it's definitely bad. we've got the engine bay buttoned up, and I really wish we had gotten a measuring tape out and measured how high the engine was sitting in relation to that sway bar before we started, because I swear it's up an inch higher than it was before, but as bad as those mounts were collapsed, it wouldn't surprise me. Let's raise it back up and get the underside buttoned back up.